All right, so we have explored independent regulatory agencies. Now we've got our other three types of groups here. We're going to start with cabinet departments. What we see in the picture here, this is the outside of the Department of Education. This would be the cabinet department you are probably most familiar with because they provide a service to you and they pass and create policies that impact you every day. So we'll talk about cabinet departments and the role that they perform. All right, so cabinet departments. In the picture there, we see the president meeting. This is President Obama meeting with his cabinet. There's a lot more people involved in the cabinet here, but we'll talk about them later. Cabinet departments themselves are mostly staff agencies. It's a little more complicated here because they'll include some independent parts, but cabinet departments are mostly staff agencies because they exist to help the president develop and implement policy. So they're going to help create, come up with ideas and stuff because they'll be full of experts, and they're also going to help the president carry out those policies. The head of each department is a person called the secretary. So they are the secretary of that department, and they make up the president's cabinet. So of every department, there's a secretary of blank, and they become a cabinet member, like Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Energy, Secretary of Veterans Affairs. The only one that's different is Department of Justice, which includes the person in charge there is called the Attorney General. And we'll talk about them a little more later. But the people in the cabinet departments are chosen for their expertise, and the secretaries are chosen for their expertise and for political reasons, because the president is going to replace these people most of the time when they come into office. So like a Democratic president will want to bring aboard like Democratic teammates and advisors, and a Republican president will want to bring aboard Republican teammates and advisors. So they'll be chosen because they're experts in that department, but also because they share political ideas with the president. All cabinet secretaries have to be confirmed by the Senate because the Constitution says so. So the president does not just get to pick whoever they want, but it has to be someone that the Congress and the president agree on. Now, each cabinet department is real big. There's 15 of them. So each one of them has like specific policy area. They have their own budget, their own staff, their own leader. There's all sorts of stuff like agriculture, education, energy, treasury, defense. There's 15 of these covering all sorts of different policy areas here. Each department has little agencies in it that function like independent regulatory agencies. So like the Department of Justice has the FBI in it, and they operate independently and like enforce the law and stuff like that. But what the cabinet departments mostly do is they serve as the policy specialists for the president. So like the president, whoever gets elected president, probably knows nothing about running schools. So they have a Department of Education that is full of experts about running schools. And the Department of Education advises the president about, these things should be good ideas. Here's what you should put into place. And the president may agree with them. And then the Department of Education would be responsible for monitoring each individual school in the country and making sure they were following those policies. And just some examples here. There's 15. We will eventually talk about them. But there's the State Department. They do all foreign policy. The Department of Defense, they are the armed forces. The Department of Justice is all law enforcement and courts around the country. And the Department of Education, obviously, schools of all different levels spread out across the country. All right, here we go. We have an Amtrak train and a mailman. Means it is time to talk about government corporations. So we're going to talk about agencies that run just like a business and provide a service to you. All right, when you hear government corporation, I want you to always think about the post office. It is the most obvious example. It's something that we know very well. We've been dealing with forever. But the government corporations, these are line agencies. Their goals are totally independent from the president. Their goals do not change, right? Think about the post office. They deliver mail. It doesn't matter if there's Republican, Democrat, they deliver the mail. That's their goal. So they provide services to citizens just like a private business. Okay, think about the post office again. We have private businesses that do the same thing, like FedEx, UPS, but the government corporation treats all citizens equally. There are places that FedEx will not ship to, but the government treats each citizen the same. They all have the same access to the service, And this is why, like, in many cases, they are providing a business service that may not survive if it was just left alone in the market. Like the post office delivering to like extreme parts of Alaska is not profitable, but the U.S. citizens there like need their mail delivered. So this is what government corporations do. Now they have to make their own money, and they get some money from taxes, so they charge you for the services. So when you mail something, you have to pay for it. When you ride an Amtrak train, you pay for it. Government corporations are going to charge way less for their services than the customer would probably end up paying in the private sector. Think about when you mail something, right? I can mail a piece of paper to my old college roommate in Anchorage, Alaska for 50 cents, right? If I'm just mailing him a letter or something like that, for 50 cents, the United States government is going to carry something from Memphis to Anchorage, Alaska. And that is a very, very cheap service that I could not get from a private company like FedEx. In some cases, the government is going to take over an industry that is like sick or like might not make it. And that's like what Amtrak is. Amtrak is passenger trains, and they are very, very successful and profitable in some parts of the country, like the Northeast and the West Coast. But it's important that everyone have access to travel, and so the government took over Amtrak to make sure that like it would still exist in places like middle of the country. Even like Memphis would not be profitable. Those trains aren't full that go from Memphis to New Orleans and Chicago and whatever, but this is a necessary service that helps people travel. Now, also, people assume that businesses would do this job better. So people tend to have real negative attitudes towards these. When we talked about those myths, people hate bureaucrats. They may be like talking about things like the post office or Amtrak because they're getting a service for incredibly cheap from the government. So big examples here. The post office is the most obvious example. They provide a service to us every day. Amtrak, they run passenger trains all across the country every day. Tennessee Valley Authority, the TVA, they just produce electricity in this area of the country and sell it to people. They charge it to people just like a private company would. If you have grown up, if you live in Memphis, MLGW is an example of a government corporation. Now, it's a local government corporation, but they're like providing utilities. In most other cities in the country, those are private businesses that provide those services like electricity and water and all that kind of stuff. But here, this is what a government corporation does, right? These three things, the post office, Amtrak, TVA, they're providing a service to citizens. Citizens pay for those services as they use them. All right, the last group here is the independent executive agencies. In the back there, we have NASA, a big NASA building where they are building the stuff to launch space shuttles. And NASA is a great example of an independent executive agency because it's pretty random. It's not doing anything that we've talked about so far. All right, independent executive agencies is just the group that makes up all the agencies that don't fit in the other category. If it is not a regulatory agency, a cabinet department, or a government corporation, we're just going to call it an independent executive agency. And that means they're a part of the executive branch, and they're independent because they've got their own goals. They're going to handle all kinds of jobs. These are random jobs. They're necessary jobs. One that you have dealt with already is the Office of Personnel Management. They hire employees. Doesn't matter, that doesn't change from Democrats to Republican presidents or whatever. They're just performing a random job for the government. All right, so some examples here. In case we're asked, NASA is a great example. Think about it. They're performing scientific research and exploring space. That does not regulate. It's not a cabinet department. It doesn't really provide a service to us that we pay for. So it doesn't fit. It's an independent executive agency. NASA is a great example of that. The General Services Administration, that's what's going on in the picture here. One of my a favorite picture of mine. The General Services Administration, they're basically, we call them the landlord of the government. They literally operate buildings for the government and all that kind of stuff. So like in the picture here, this guy's got to climb up there and like clean off the Lincoln Memorial. General Services Administration does stuff like change light bulbs in the White House or the federal building downtown Memphis. Like They make sure that the buildings operate for the government, which is a super important part of the government, but like not a glamorous thing we would read about or think about. So General Service Administration, another one there you already know, we talked about Office of Personnel Management. They're hiring employees for the government, a very important task for the government, but like doesn't fit into any of those other categories. So these are the executive agencies. All right, that's it. We have done our job of going through the different types of agencies today. Surely some government agency somewhere had to go round up this turkey for President Trump to pardon to get ready for Thanksgiving. But all sorts of agencies we have gone through today. All right, when we are categorizing these different types of agencies, the first thing you need to be able to do is identify whether or not the agency is a staff agency or a line agency. Is it a staff or a line agency based on its goal? Does it exist to help the president? Does it exist to help you? That's the main differentiation between those two. Then the big groups that we would deal with and that we're likely to be asked about, we're probably not going to be asked about executive agencies much, but we will be asked about the role of independent regulatory agencies. We'll be asked to explain how they're independent. We'll be asked to explain how they regulate, how they make some rules. We'll have to describe the role of cabinet departments, how they help the president come up with policies, help the president implement policies, and we may have to describe the role of government corporations, providing services to citizens. All right, that is it for today. We are done categorizing the different types of agencies. We will end up spending some time going through some more specific stuff about important agencies to remember, and then we're going to explain how these agencies impact policy making.